Hello imaginative people and welcome to Brainstorming. I'm Tizard, award-winning dream punk and deeply weird fantasy author. And yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. As ever, I am your reliably zany inspiration mystic, here to talk about creative writing, brainstorming story ideas, and how to take your imagination into new, uncharted territory, even when time, energy and space, or the lack of it, seem to be set against you. Today in episode 12, I'm going to talk about frustration with the limitations and constraints life throws at us, how we might find ways, sneakier ways, to squeeze in more opportunities to write or create, even when 20 minutes seems too much, and you know how much I love my 20-minute stints. Also, do we need a sacred space for our writing to help us properly switch off from the responsibilities crowding in on us from normal life? And if so, how do we create that space for ourselves? I've had lots of comments from the lovely author community online to help me answer some of these questions. And don't forget, there'll be another session of Exquisite Corpse gameplay in the last section of the show, which will be as bonkers as ever. So let's get on with the show. On a personal note, and this is where this episode is coming from, I'm still dealing with the dregs of long COVID. I attempted to work a normal week last week and realised I'm not quite there yet. Almost. So close, but just not there. Over and over again, I catch myself feeling really annoyed and sort of trapped, and I have to remind myself, thank goodness I've made it this far. I'm almost normal. Well, I've never been normal in that way, if you know what I mean. And of course, this low energy state doesn't just affect my day job, it affects my writing and my creativity as well. When I'm well, I usually manage to squeeze in up to an hour of writing time before I start to work. When I'm going into the office, that's usually made up of 5 or 10 minutes while I have my cup of tea and my breakfast. And then the rest of it is on the commute, scribbling into a pad and ignoring any strange looks, potentially hiding under a hood from any colleagues who may recognise me on the way. This scribbled material will usually be consolidated at weekends. Days when I'm working from home, I usually get to use my computer before I start to work. Unless I'm at a very early stage of an idea where I might still reach for a notepad, there's something about an actual blank page and a pen that gives me permission to write potential rubbish, which loosens me up in the brainstorming stage. But at the moment, my time is restricted. I'm having to manage my lower energy levels, and the day job has to be the priority, otherwise I don't get to eat. Then again, I often feel like whatever writing I manage to squeeze in the morning helps warm up my brain before I start work. So there's a balancing act here. I do what energises me and helps set me up for a productive day when I'm not in a screamingly grumpy mood, which naturally happens if I don't get to write. Trust me, you do not want to meet that person. But writing at this limited energy level, even in the time slot I've allowed myself, my productivity has also gone down. I spend less of that time actually putting down words and more of it talking to myself or my bear conference, as some subscribers will remember. They're very good at listening without critical comment. Highly recommended. During this past week, most days, I managed only 350 words per morning. Now that might be absolutely fine for someone who likes to work at that rate or who's writing something quite short. I mean, if you wrote that much for a picture book, my God, you're potentially going at extreme speeds. But it's a lot less than I'm accustomed to writing. This 350 word limit I found myself working in was bothering me so much, I actually got out the calculator to work out what my own personal worst case scenario would be if I carried on at this rate for, say, a year. Which isn't, of course, anything like a worst case scenario, but this is how it gets, doesn't it, when you're frustrated. Allowing for a couple of mornings off per week, one for recuperation, one for podcast preparation, which is still creative but doesn't count towards a book, and that's actually 91,350 words. And do you know what? That's actually really good. Really surprising. Bearing in mind I've been writing novellas or short novels around 40,000 words, just writing 350 words per day is enough for me to aim for a short novel a year on average. And that's not taking into account holidays where I might do a bit more or energy spurts. Conclusion? If you're feeling really frustrated with your energy levels or your current output, especially if that might be lower than it's been before for whatever reason, this worst case scenario check, in inverted commas, is a good exercise. We have to adapt to what we have and not bully ourselves into expecting too much. If anything, give yourself a target that you could potentially exceed. Then when you go over, you'll get an energy boost from seeing how much you've done. Every small step is still a step in the right direction. And if we start to fret about how little it seems, just grab the calculator and see what it really looks like in the bigger picture. By the way, I don't really believe in daily word counts myself, because you can't count great story ideas in word numbers. And sometimes you are just creating or developing ideas, laying the foundations. I prefer to have an overall goal like a book, and to generally just keep an eye on how much I'm producing to assure myself that that's enough to reach that goal within a reasonable time period. So that's energy limits and general output as a result. What about time limits? Well, if you've listened to at least a few of my shows before, you'll probably know about the 20 minutes I advocate for brainstorming a new idea and getting something new out on paper. But what if you don't even have 20 minutes in a day? What if your life is that busy? On social media, I was yakking about time constraints and my 20-minute magic, and I bumped into an author called Trinice Ferreira, who claims to write in a regular 12-minute slot. This really impressed me. There's something about that figure, 12 minutes. 10 minutes doesn't seem like much. 2 minutes seems like almost nothing at all. But put the two together, it's a curious figure. I like that it feels a little bit uneven. So I asked her what inspired her to do this. Trinice said she first got the idea from a webinar she watched, though she couldn't remember where it was from. The speaker advocated making a commitment that made writing daily manageable, and that's what resonated with Trinice. As a New Year's resolution in January 22, she committed to writing 12 minutes a day for 100 days. She also bought some typewriter stickers and printed a sheet of paper with 100 squares, giving herself a sticker each day. She said, "I'm a person who responds very well to rewards, and this simple act kept me motivated to write every day. It was also very satisfying to look at my rows of completed squares and think about all the progress I made in 10 days, 20 days, and 60 days." She went on to say, "The thing about committing to 12 minutes a day is that it's very doable. 15, even 30 minutes can feel daunting, How am I going to set aside a whole 30 minutes to write? But everyone, even the busiest amongst us, has 12 minutes. She went on to tell me that when she started, she had just begun a new corporate job, while also working part-time as a publicist with a professional sports team in LA, and was finishing up a writing course. On top of that, she goes to the gym 3 to 4 times a week and cooks 4 nights a week, and she still finds 12 minutes a day. Pretty amazing. She also said that when struggling to write in those 12 minutes, she also sometimes brainstorms ideas on character names, book titles, what would happen if scenarios, and revises and edits as well. I love that she also said, writing is like any muscle, and the more you commit to exercising it daily, the easier it becomes to lift heavier and to keep going for longer stretches of time. So true. Thank you, Trinice, for sharing your inspiring and incredibly busy journey. And it just proves how, as creative people, we can do a lot with a little. Now, this is all incredibly sensible. We will shortly be moving towards the sillier part of the podcast where I play Exquisite Corpse and brainstorm some new story ideas. But there is one last aspect of frustration that I want to discuss, and that's about finding the space to write. Whether we need a sacred space in which to write. But to lead into this, I want to tell you about a funny dream I had. I promise you, this has relevance to the topic. But it is weird, perhaps deeply weird, that I had this dream very recently during the week, as if my unconscious mind had a few things to add to the show. Why not? The dream was so funny to me, I actually woke up laughing. But it's not just about me. I think if we do a quick dream analysis, you might agree that it explores a few possible issues about me as a writer that may be universal to creators of all kinds, maybe even you. See what you think. I must apologise in advance as well to Fraser Armitage, the author whose story I read out in episode 10. We've never met in person, but we chat on social media from time to time. Anyway, I dreamt that Fraser announced on Twitter that he was going to Australia to interview nuns for a writing project. As you do. He very kindly offered to send me some genuine Australian nuns' socks, because this would aid my disguise as I tried to get into a UK nunnery, also for a writing project. Because that's where fantasy novels are inspired, aren't they? I was grateful for the offer of these socks, but I had a niggling concern in the back of my mind that should anyone perform forensic testing on my socks, as you do, they'd find evidence that they belonged to Australian nuns, and my cover as a fake nun would be blown. So if you look at this sensibly, if that's possible, you could interpret my dream as saying one or more things about me as an author, or just general angst that authors sometimes have. You could say, first of all, that this is a sign of imposter syndrome, which is very common. I think we all feel that from time to time. So I'm having to disguise myself wearing something another author has given me in order to pretend to be something I'm not, to get into this UK nunnery with borrowed socks. You could say I've also come to believe that stories come from socks, which of course they do on Brainstorming. You could also see how I've come to associate writing and inspiration with the need to retreat and withdraw to a sacred space to get ideas from nunneries, whether they be in Australia or the UK, apparently. This kind of ties in with what has been on my mind about frustration. Not only do we have time limits and energy limits to contend with, but there may be a space issue as well. Perhaps for my part, working from home constantly in the day job means the space I normally reserve for my writing has started to blur into and cross boundaries into my workspace, or my workspace blur into my personal space. You see what I'm saying? That's happening just a little bit too much. And this also is about how difficult it might be sometimes to switch off from normal life and stress. This inspired me to put the question to the online author community. I asked authors, do you feel the need to create a sacred space for your writing? If so, how do you keep normal life and daily stresses outside of that sacred space? Is it easy to switch off from all of that? Rudy Elaine said, I mostly surround myself with my favourite books and art to create a space that promotes creativity. Mariah, who writes as M.L. White, said, I'd love to have a sacred space for my writing. Usually I write at my desk, and my favourite music and films help me switch on my writing mood. Sometimes they aren't enough, unfortunately. Darren Summerfield said, no, I don't. I went the opposite way. I trained myself to write anywhere in any circumstances so I can take advantage of any writing opportunities. Very wise if you can manage to do this. The adaptive creative. Virginia Vincent said, give me a pair of headphones and Tchaikovsky and anywhere is a good place to write. That's an excellent idea, using music which you can take with you anywhere to help neutralise or sanctify a space so it doesn't matter where you are. I wish I could write to music. Sadly, it just distracts me. But a brilliant tool if you can do that. Fraser Armitage said, I feel that my sacred space isn't a physical place. It's somewhere in my imagination that's reserved for the story I'm working on. As for the environment in which I write, it doesn't make a difference once I'm in the zone. And that zone, that's my sacred space. Brilliant. This definitely rings true for me. I think it's all about the habits you set up. Whether it's 12 minutes or some other time slot we've reserved for ourselves, we need to be adaptable about where that slot might happen. But doing it regularly means it will become like a mind space, and that's something you can potentially take with you anywhere. This is a topic I will return to definitely. It's so relevant to inspiration and how to get into the zone of creating and being imaginative. Speaking of which, but before we begin the brainstorming section of the show, I must share with you a poem about Exquisite Corpse. I came across a goblin on Twitter. Yes, the poet goblin who writes poems for pretty much anyone. So I asked the goblin, please could you write a poem about Exquisite Corpse? And this is what the goblin wrote. Open thy mind and enter thy soul, so many fables already told. Without your shackles, free association, let's make us a darker interpretation. For writers, game masters, and us poets too, this little word game is one for you. Incredible! Thank you so much, Poet Goblin. That set the tone perfectly. And now it really is time to bring out the socks of destiny. Right then. First describing word is going to be, this is a Twitter ID, Yashal_Chisty, and it is clownish. Right. Who or what was clownish? First noun is from Mariah. Train. The clownish train. Okay. Let's see what that clownish train got up to. This is from Alessandro Bozzo. Trudged up the mountain pass with. Interesting. It says trudged, but I'm thinking chugged, because that's more like a train. And yeah, in a way, a train could trudge up a mountain pass, although in my head it's sprouting legs and feet in order to do so. Clown feet, in fact. This is weird. I like it. So let's find a describing word to see who or what it went up the mountain pass with. This is from Fraser Armitage, and false. Interesting adjective there. Let's see where this is going. This is from, if I can just disentangle them, this is from me, and it is author. Oh wow, the clownish train trudged up the mountain pass with the false author. That's really interesting. But first, I think I'm going to have to pour some green tea, because I am gasping by now. Everything's going to come clear after my first sip of green tea, of course. Right, let's have a look at that again. The clownish train trudged up the mountain pass with the false author. So someone who is either pretending to be an author, they're not really an author, or I do wonder an author, if it's an author who has that sort of imposter syndrome that a lot of us sometimes feel from time to time. I feel it from time to time, when you just think, oh, am I the real deal? Do I really know what I'm doing? So it could be referring to that, but I quite like the idea of someone pretending to be an author, or an author who is genuine but is being deceptive about their reasons for being there. Okay, they've got a reason for going up the mountain pass with a clownish train, but they're being, they're keeping that to themselves. They have a secret mission, something other than what they say they're setting out to do. I wonder if the author they say they're going to write an article about mountain wildlife, or the cultural lifestyle of a small remote village living close to the top of the mountain. So it's like a cultural study for a magazine or a newspaper, but actually their secret mission is they've gone there to search for treasure or to steal something from the people living there, or to learn a secret form of shamanism. Who are they trying to hide this information from? Why would they need to hide this purpose. I suppose if it's treasure or they want to steal something, then that's kind of obvious, but that they would need to hide it. But I wonder if, maybe they're just hiding it from their employer, whoever runs the magazine or newspaper. They'll certainly need to keep it from the locals, if it's a forbidden form of shamanism, or again, if they want to steal something. So how does the clownish train come into play here? I think I need some more green tea already. Let's just see. Clownish train. Is it, is the train itself clownish, or is it part of a carnival, a travelling circus? Has this false, deceptive author hitched a ride with a carnival? That would be a very top secret, sneaky kind of way of getting up there, if there happens to be another train, like a normal train or a bus, or even a means of hiking up there. That would be a very strange choice of transport. But the fact that the clownish train trudged up the mountain pass with the false author makes me feel as if either the author is being shadowed in some way, in that the train or the people on the train, let's face it, or in this travelling circus, have become aware of the author and what's going on, or they're working with her to hide her, because they too want a piece of this action. I wonder if that's one way of writing it, is if she starts out on her own, going up there with this sort of lone mission to look for treasure, or to find out this sort of magical form of shamanism that she can learn up there, something forbidden up there, which is why she's having to be deceptive. And then when she hitches a ride on this carnival, circus train that's passing through, she gets found out. She pretends to be one thing on the train. People seem to accept her, what her story is. Oh, she's just writing an article, whatever. Oh, it's interesting to be on this train full of acrobats and other performers. But someone finds her out, and then they are with her, in that sense, in that they're gonna, maybe a couple of people strike a bargain with her and say, look, we know what you're up to and we want a piece of that. This is a really colourful story. Brainstorm. I think there's a lot that could be explored in this, an awful lot, because there's still, okay, what is it that she's going up there for? What is the cause of the deception? And yeah, the idea of this clownish train could be taken in a couple of ways. So this is a really good one. And I think it's partly thanks to that word false, because there's a lot you can do with that. It's sort of word, you could take it one way or the other. A person can be false in various different ways, a disguise, or they're hiding something, or they don't really feel comfortable in claiming them, their role in life. They feel as if they're not up to par in their career choice. They feel like they're false. So that's another way of looking at this. Perhaps the journey up the mountain pass ends up being about these interactions with the people on the train, and her sort of learning to embrace what her career choice, and realise that yes, she's good at this. She just needs to find the right topic to write about. Interesting. So I'm going to pick another. Let's see. This is from Paul Thomas. Deceased. Oh, okay. Right then. What or who? Someone's already dead before we've even started the story. So what is going to happen here? This is from Ian Nathaniel Cohen. Griffin. I always have to remind myself, so this is a creature with the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle. Yes, so a deceased griffin. Are we in the land of the dead or the undead? Right, wow. What did this griffin get up to? This is from Magna Carta 1967. Dug deep into the sackcloth pockets of. Ooh, okay, it's an interesting one. Someone with sackcloth pockets, which are deep and presumably have something important inside them. But what exactly? Let's see. Oh, they're all getting clumped together. There's too many trying to come out. Right, here we go. This is from Mariah. Great. Again, that's quite an open word because it can be great as in physically large, or it could be great as in has a big impact on something. So this is from Becky_Clough on Twitter. Vicar. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to have to write this down. So, the deceased griffin dug deep into the sackcloth pockets of the great vicar. Oh, I think we're in heaven or something. Or we are in some, maybe in some in-between land, like the land of the dead. What's the name of it? The in-between space before you're meant to find out if you're going to go to heaven or hell, or something like that. Some in-between space, because the griffin has died not that long ago, and there's something that he wants to get out of the sackcloth pockets of a great vicar. A vicar is surely on his way to heaven, you'd think, but I don't know, you could do something really weird with this. Perhaps that's the twist of the story, where you're assuming, and the griffin is assuming, that the vicar is on his way to heaven, but it might be he lost his faith, or he did something awful. He was false, like our author in the previous one, in some way, and so actually this griffin in this sort of underworld is trying to steal something from his pockets, his deep pockets, which contain something. It must be something to do with the ability to get into heaven. And then it turns out in the end the vicar isn't going there, and so the griffin has damned himself by doing this. I wonder if what it is that the vicar has in his pockets is, well, the griffin obviously expects them to be something almost like a token that can get you into heaven, or some sign or symbol of a good and godly life. But then when he reaches in, he finds that there's something else entirely, and perhaps they're symbols of something awful that the vicar's done. Maybe they are weapons or vials of poison which that the vicar used to kill people. That would be interesting. I have to just add as well, I did make a note on the slip of paper where I write down on these little slips of paper, on one side the person's name or Twitter ID, whatever they've given consent for me to declare to the world on this podcast. But then on the other side, I did make a note that originally this person, Magna Carta in 1967, where they wrote "dug deep into the sackcloth pockets of," they'd also put, well, it was started off as a longer one. They put "containing 3 spiral galaxies." And I had to leave that out to make it fit within the sentence. So quite often I do have to, because it's quite tricky to explain, that with the action part of an exquisite corpse in the middle, it has to end with the word "with," "for," "to," "around," "on," or things like that, words like that to tag them. So you've got person 1 did something with 2 or 4, person 2. And if they've put a whole phrase that is sort of closed and doesn't allow for the sentence to move on to person 2. So I can't remember what it was now because I put this in brackets, and it was a while ago that this person submitted, but it was something along the lines of "dug deep into sackcloth pockets that contained 3 spiral galaxies." I thought, well, I need to put "of" or something at the end to tag it to the next person. I was like, oh, I can't fit it in. It's too long. But I put it in brackets underneath to remind myself in case it came up as it's just an interesting extra idea that this person had, that these pockets contained 3 spiral galaxies. I mean, that's really interesting and weird. Does that change the story at all? I think it would change where it would go. From what I've been describing about, something actually nasty is there when the griffin's trying to sort of steal his way into heaven with something, but then it turns out to be something completely different and quite dark that actually takes him to hell. But what if he put his hand is going to be his claw or his paw, depending on which end of the body he's talking about, and then finds that there are 3 spiral galaxies inside the pockets. Perhaps that goes off into a more dream punk area of writing, which is right up my street, but it would be very unexpected. And I wonder how you would tie that together as a story, because this is what I've been thinking about lately, about how you do have to, even if you've got a twist or something completely unexpected, usually to make it believable within the context of the story, you do need to plant a seed about something along those lines at the beginning of the story, to then have that tie something up or take us somewhere that isn't completely doesn't completely make the reader go, what? Where did that come from? Rather than just making them feel like they're spiraling out of control in this story. So I wonder if the Griffin did that, what would it be that the story began with to kind of preempt that, just in a subtle way, so that when it happens, despite all his expectations about being taken into heaven by these 3 gold coins or something like that prove, I don't know, faith, love and obedience or something like that take you into heaven, instead of being able to steal those, he then is plunged into one of 3 completely different galaxies. That's a tricky one. maybe it's a play on a phrase, that phrase, the kingdom of heaven is within, or something like that. And so when the griffin, at the beginning of the story, first realises he's died and he enters this kind of in-between underworld, and realises, he has to choose a path, and then just sees a vicar in his sackcloth clothes, because everything's very plain in the land of the dead, obviously. And he goes following after him, thinking, I'm going to follow him, I'm going to end up in heaven this way. Oh, but I might need to steal something from him in order to sort of get my ticket, as it were, or physically get my ticket into heaven. But when he first arrives, maybe the vicar says something like that to him, and he thinks it's a riddle. The kingdom of heaven is within. Oh, he's just, saying things from the Bible. It's all very abstract, kind of deep truth stuff. Not the kind of thing that this griffin has bothered really thinking about in his lifetime. And maybe all around them they can see, it's like they're in space. They can see these galaxies that are out there. And he's thinking, well, obviously it's not physically true that the kingdom of heaven is within, because clearly they're out there. We're in an external space, in space. But then when he reaches into the pocket, when he finally gets that chance to try and steal from the vicar, he is plunged into a spiral galaxy, and in some way, which I can't quite think of right now, but it's something that could be explored, this is kind of proves the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within. It's within the vicar's pocket, or the griffin realises it's somehow a part of his own soul, or something like that. It could go very deep, but of course the action part says dug deep, so that's okay. We're just following the rules. I'm just taking prompts from what you have written to me, so that's all good. Right, number 3. It's got to be good. What have we got here? This is from Mr. Joseph Clark. Loving. Ah, okay. We have a loving character. But what is that character? This is from Fraser Armitage. Horizon. A loving horizon. Great. Right, what are we going to do with that? Okay, I'm not going to pass judgment on our word selections, or what is we're going to have to do to make this work. I'm just going to pull out an action which is from Tom. Oh no, this is crazy. Passed through the TSA checkpoint with. I admit I had to look this up. This might be an American phrase, or I haven't been to an airport in a very long time. Because I looked it up. TSA is Transportation Security Administration. I made a note on the slip of paper. So, pass through the TSA checkpoint with. So we have a loving horizon that's going on holiday or a business trip. And is at the airport with someone going through a checkpoint. Of course, we'll make it work somehow. I don't know how. Right, this is from, oh, my hands got stuck. Okay, Jen Moo Cat galloping. Okay, because you gallop through the checkpoint. You're right. Okay. Right, final word. I'm scared now. Oh dear. This is from Parveen. And it is pickle. Okay, I think we're in trouble now. This has got to be one of the weirdest ones I think we've ever had on the show. The loving horizon passed through the TSA checkpoint with the galloping pickle. Why do I feel like... Because the first two were really good, actually. If you think about it, they had some real story potential. I mean, you know, perhaps more easily graspable, for want of another word, than the average bizarreness. And now all the bizarreness and the awkwardness has piled up, waiting to launch itself on us, because those first two were obviously too good, too usable, too accessible. And now we are left with, and I just paused to write it down because I cannot wrap my head around it any other way. The loving horizon passed through the TSA checkpoint with the galloping pickle. Okay, let's just give it a go. Because every Exquisite Corpse has something in it. We just have to make it happen. Okay, so it's not necessarily a pickle, it's someone in a pickle costume, okay? Actually, all three of these are about deception and disguises, because we had the false author going up the mountain with the first one, and then the griffin trying to trick his way into heaven, and now we have somebody, because obviously if you're trying to sneak through customs or whatever, you dress up as a pickle. Of course you do, because then security just can't see you anymore. Okay, let's be calm, take a breath. Right, so somebody dressed as a pickle, or in some other way as a pickle. Actually, if you're in a pickle, you know, maybe it's a slightly old-fashioned phrase, but if you're in a pickle, you're in some trouble. And this person is galloping, so they're running fast away from a problem, and they need to get away. They need to get on a plane, and they've gone through something that in their lives that has really frightened them. They're on the run. Why would a pickle be on the run? I do not know. It sounds like a Christmas cracker joke. Why was the pickle on the run? I'm not sure. If you think of something, write in and tell me, because that could be an interesting joke. So a pickle that is on the run. All I can think is that they're running through or towards this TSA checkpoint, desperate to get through so they can catch their plane and get away from whatever frightening situation they're in. Because obviously someone is chasing them and they're in trouble. But the loving horizon passed through the TSA checkpoint. It feels as though it's just a sunset, a beautiful pink, flamingo pink sunset is shining through the windows and is lighting everything up with a warm glow and making this pickle, or person who is in a pickle, who's also galloping, that it's making them feel that everything's actually going to be okay. There's also the sense in which they're moving into new horizons. So they're being embraced by this new life that awaits them. So in an abstract way, you could say that the loving horizon did indeed pass through the TSA checkpoint with this galloping person in a pickle. Yeah, it feels like a moment in a story, the end of a story where everything's tied together after a long chase scene, possibly involving vegetables. It's not as bad as I first thought as far as Exquisite Corpses go. This is just a glimpse into a story with a lovely, warm, fuzzy ending. With that in mind, I hope you enjoyed the show and the Exquisite Corpse games, and that wherever you are, you feel a little bit brighter and a little bit more inspired, or maybe a lot more inspired. Please do get in touch with me at tizard.com if any of these Exquisite Corpses or ones from previous shows have inspired you to brainstorm or even write a story. And if the story is relatively short, please share it with me if you will, and I may end up reading it out on the show. Don't forget, you can also send your comments to me at tizard.com or on Twitter at Tizard, or drop me a line on the Brainstorming page on my website. Whatever you've got to say, it all helps to keep this podcast interactive, which is my ultimate goal for this. So until next time, stay well, go forth and be inspired.